Good afternoon. Good afternoon, members. For those who are new to this committee, I'm Chris Valderrama, Chair, Vice Chair Charkoudian, and our members. We are here for a briefing this afternoon regarding the housing conditions for migrant and seasonal farm workers. So we're going to get started here. I just want to let the members know we're going to have several panels. We have 4 panels. We're guesstimating 20 minutes on the first panel, then 15, 20, 15, and we will leave room for questions, Q&A after each panel. Perhaps 10 minutes max, that's a lot of time, but if you really have a question, like truly have a question, please pose it. If not, you can always meet with our panelists following this briefing. So with that said, we'll start off with the Maryland Department of Labor. We have Aaron Roth and Lauren, is it Gilwey? Thank you.
Okay, I think everybody can hear me. Very good. Good afternoon, Chair Valderrama and Vice Chair Charkoudian and members of the committee. My name is Aaron Roth, and I am the Assistant Secretary for the Division of Workforce Development and Adult Learning at the Maryland Department of Labor. I am joined today by my colleague, as just mentioned, Lauren Gilwey, who is the Policy Director for my division. Thank you for inviting the department to brief your committee today. And I do, by the way, bring greetings from our Labor Secretary, Portia Wu, and Deputy Secretary, Jason Perkins-Cohen. My division at Labor, the Division of Workforce Development and Adult Learning, is the state's primary workforce development agency. We work with businesses and job seekers as our primary customers. For businesses, we're here to ensure that there's a qualified pipeline of skilled workers to remain competitive. And for workers, especially job seekers, our primary mission is to support skill building and job preparation and to connect those workers with opportunities to put their skills to good use through connections to employers and careers. As a state workforce agency, our division is primarily funded by federal funds tied to the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, sometimes referred to as WIOA. Today, I'm pleased to brief the committee on 2 of our federally funded programs. 1, the Migrant and Seasonal Farm Worker Program, and 2, the Foreign Labor Certification Program. You can see the agenda on your screen. So during my allotted time, we do intend to briefly discuss how these 2 programs, which I think you'll see have a rather narrow scope, are governed by federal regulations and funding and are administered by our division at Labor. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Labor Department administers both the Migrant Seasonal Farm Worker and Foreign Labor Certification Programs as required by federal law, regulation, and policy. One thing to mention is that all costs associated with these programs are paid for by federal dollars. And I draw your attention to this because as you'll see as we get into it here, that we have a rather narrow but important scope. And we are actually only allowed by USCOL to have our staff work on these federally funded activities. So we're not allowed to have these workers go outside of the scope that I share today. Of course, we're required to work closely with the U.S. Department of Labor to ensure compliance with all matters related to these efforts. Okay, Migrant and Seasonal Farm Worker Program. So let's discuss this one first. Migrant and seasonal farm workers, who are they? By the federal definition, they are work-authorized seasonal agricultural workers, and they may reflect a domestic workforce. In Maryland, we experience seasons. I don't know about you, but this weekend's wintry mix was a good reminder of that for me. And it is important to keep in mind, with all jokes aside, that migrant and seasonal farm workers, just like our state's crops and farmers, do have peak seasons. So we know, for example, that in July, that's the peak season for Maryland tomatoes, corn, watermelons, whereas apples are more typically picked in the fall. And of course, during the winter, we see way less agricultural activity in Maryland overall for the picking. It's also important to note that migrant and seasonal farm workers are not tied to any particular immigrant status. They must be work authorized to meet the federal rule, but their immigration status is not necessarily contingent upon their employment at a particular job site. And by definition, migrant and seasonal farm workers cannot reasonably return home each day, and therefore employers are actually required to provide housing for them. The last thing I would note on this slide here is that we know that foreign labor has more commonly become the primary source of agricultural talent in recent decades here in our state. So we find that there are actually very few individuals that meet that migrant and seasonal farm worker definition, that federal definition there. So just for example, in 2025, Maryland only interacted with 7 migrant and seasonal farm workers meeting that federal definition, and all were in employer-provided housing. And as I understand it, that's a typical number for how many we may come upon to provide services in any recent year. Next slide. Okay, so labor's outreach and role. So the U.S. Department of Labor funds Maryland Labor, our division, to conduct outreach and to identify farm workers that would potentially qualify for federal migrant and seasonal farm worker services. The goal of the program is primarily to ensure that eligible migrant and seasonal farm workers are aware of the whole suite of career resources, skill building resources that are available at places like the 33 American Job Centers that we have across the state. So opportunities to pursue things like English language classes, occupational training, registered apprenticeship. So the primary goal of the program is to expose migrant and seasonal farm workers who meet that definition to these other opportunities that they may be of interest in and not yet have familiarity with. So our outreach staff are responsible for ensuring that eligible migrant and seasonal farm workers know how to access the American Job Center services if they're interested. And our outreach workers are actually employees of those 33 American Job Centers, so they are very well attuned to the resource landscape. They conduct outreach to identify potential migrant and seasonal farm workers, primarily during peak seasons. So visits are coordinated with employers for our staff and our scope to ensure minimal disruption for both employers and for the workers. The department's outreach staff are also responsible for ensuring these migrant and seasonal farm workers are aware of their rights and have the ability to report problems if and when they would like to do so. Next slide. Thank you, Lauren. We have a state monitor advocate role. So what is that? Per federal rules, all states must have a full-time state monitor advocate to oversee the migrant and seasonal farm worker program. This position, just like everything else in the program, is federally funded, and as outlined here on the slide, the state monitor advocate is responsible for a variety of activities. They train and review those American Job Centers outreach staff who are the ones visiting the farms to connect with eligible migrant and seasonal farm workers. They oversee federal administrative obligations, such as the state's agricultural outreach plan, which is a part of that WIOA state plan for the state's workforce system. The individual also works closely with farmers, associations, workforce partners, other stakeholders, the U.S. Department of Labor's regional and national monitor advocates to ensure everything is going well with the program. And finally, the Migrant and Seasonal Farm Worker Program State Monitor Advocate does ensure that any complaints received are logged and referred to the appropriate agencies for prompt resolution. Okay. So that's migrant and seasonal farm worker. Next, I'm going to shift gears here and talk about foreign labor certification for just a moment. So this program is different than migrant and seasonal farm worker, MSFW, in that it focuses on H-2A visa holders and involves employers bringing workers over from another country when a domestic workforce is proven to be unavailable. So if unfamiliar, the H-2A visa program, that's the one that allows for employers to recruit international workers for roles that they are unable to fill with U.S. workers. And so before someone gets approved for that H-2A visa, employers are actually required to make a concerted effort to offer the job to a domestic worker first. And how that happens in Maryland is that employers do this by working with our team to post their jobs on the Maryland Workforce Exchange, which is our state's job bank. And if no worker applies for that job within 60 to 75 days, of posting it, they're likely to be approved by the federal government for the H-2A visa program. So that's one core piece that we own within the broader landscape. Similar to the MSFW program, H-2A employers are required to provide housing. Foreign labor certification staff are responsible for inspecting the H-2A housing, conducting outreach to these workers on resources and complaint processes available to them. And as you can see from this slide here, the Foreign Labor Certification Program does serve many more individuals and employers in a fiscal year than the Migrant and Seasonal Farm Worker Program that I just described. Okay, next, outreach to H-2A visa workers. So just as with the Migrant and Seasonal Farm Worker Program, our staff conduct outreach to H-2A visa workers at the job site and in housing to ensure workers' rights are being followed and to process any complaints or concerns that workers may have. And just like the Migrant and Seasonal Farm Worker outreach work, visits are coordinated with employers to ensure minimal disruption. So a little bit on the complaint process and worker protections. Since Maryland Labor only oversees these 2 federally funded employment programs, as you may expect, our scope to handle complaints is narrow. Farm workers in both of those programs are able to file complaints on a variety of issues, including concerns about housing conditions, employment conditions, and the state monitor advocate, that same role that I mentioned earlier, that individual and that role is responsible for ensuring that complaints are adequately processed and sent to the appropriate entity for resolution if it's not the Labor Department. And if the labor team does receive a complaint from an individual who's not a migrant and seasonal farm worker or H-2A visa holder, we do work to direct those individuals to the best of our ability outside of our scope to publicly available resources, other stakeholder groups, as it might be appropriate. And of course, complaint matters are always handled privately with workers, and unresolved complaints are referred by the state monitor advocate to the appropriate enforcement agency, legal aid organization, or consumer advocate organization. That actually concludes my presentation today. I hope this was helpful, and thank you for the opportunity to address your committee about 2 programs that don't often get a whole lot of face time with all of you, so I appreciate you having an interest in this, and if there are any questions that you might have, I'm happy to take them, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Were you presenting as well, or were you her right?
No.
Okay. So I actually do have one quick question. So on the second to last page where it says H-2A workers cannot change employers without a formal and extensive process, I was just curious, on average, what is the length of time of that extensive process? Because I know dealing with H-2A workers can't be easy.
It's a great question, and I have to admit I don't know the answer offhand, and I'd rather get back to you if that would be acceptable. My understanding is that process is actually driven by the federal government, so we can look and see.
That kind of answers my question already.
Yeah.
Probably. Okay. Are there, yes, Delegate Weigel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The housing, can you talk a little bit about the specifics of the housing requirements? Are the housing requirements the same as if someone has a rental property for a longer term rental, or are these considered short-term rentals? I'm thinking about all the lead-based paint laws and all that sort of thing.
I see.
Do they apply to this seasonal housing as well?
Sure. So a good example is, water quality, general safety issues. Those are the things that if we are not the experts and that's not our core function to check it, we will make sure the experts at a local health department, for example, or the appropriate entity has checked on the water quality. But we do, I have to admit, I'm not as familiar with the rental housing criteria that.
So are these considered rental housing, or is it fall under some other category that they're not subject to the same requirements?
Do you happen to know the answer? I think migrant housing may be rental, it may be owned. I don't think that that's a factor in it, but Lauren.
Yeah, I think, our understanding is that it really is dependent upon what the employer provides. In speaking with some of our staff, I know some of it is, farmer-owned housing. It could be on their property. It could be a property down the street. It could be something temporary. But it just has to be provided by them. But the specifics in terms of ownership, I would say we're not certain about.
So we have a lot of orchards in our area, what's left of them. So some of them do have housing on site, so you all don't inspect that housing or things like that.
If they have.
I'm not suggesting that you should, I'm just trying to figure out if they are subject to.
So if they have an H-2A visa worker, we would.
You would, okay.
And if they, had a migrant and seasonal farm worker, which there are not that many of within the state, to the best of our knowledge, we would be responsible for that.
Okay,
So
yeah.
we do check with some orchards for sure, and we could get into the specifics after this if that would be helpful.
I know it used to be a thing every summer. I don't see them anymore.
see.
So I think it's kind of going by the wayside, but just curious about the requirements on the housing. And then, so you talked a lot about the workers, but what kind of training do you have for the employers so they're aware of the requirements that that the state has?
Sure. I'm open if there are additional steps that we could take, or always happy to provide stakeholder audiences with the facts and make sure everybody's trained up and feels comfortable. That's I think really important to making sure people know how to follow the rules and what those rules are. I think our staff routinely go out and provide stakeholder engagement, usually on an individual grower-to-grower basis. I can think back to us doing some broader things in partnership with the Department of Agriculture, for example, but I'm not aware of anything that's happened more recently.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right, thank you.
Delegate Arends.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Got a couple quick ones for you. On migrant and seasonal farm worker population, give me an example on the second or third page. It says all program staff are federally funded and prohibited from working on state-created activities. What is that? What does that mean to me?
Sure. So the migrant and seasonal farm worker federal definition is that they must be work authorized, and so that's really our scope. So, we're looking, we may interact with other individuals, but our scope is really checking on whether they meet the criteria for that program. Hopefully that helps to clarify.
Okay, on the next page, you say that migrant and seasonal farm worker population are not tied to any particular immigration status and often represent domestic workforce. What does that mean to me? Are they, as being a migrant seasonal worker, what are they, I don't know, legal, illegal? What does that mean? They're not tied to anything.
The historic definition of a migrant and seasonal farm worker really began in the World War II era, when there was an agricultural labor shortage. And MSFWs were initially a heavily domestic workforce. So it could have been an American-born individual who traveled up and down the eastern seaboard, traveled with the seasons, picked fruit, apples in New England in the fall, and then picked citrus in Florida.
So you're tying them to working in the fields and stuff like that?
Correct.
So
it's often, there's not an immigration status. This could be a domestic-born person.
wouldn't they be, oh, okay, it doesn't have to, this has to be a domestic person?
Not necessarily, but
Okay.
historically it has been, and there's very few of these individuals left, which
Okay,
is
migrant to me defines something. It means something like
means they move, right, from one place to another.
one place to another, okay. Okay, and the actual employers are required to provide housing. What does that look like as far as, I'm assuming I'm working on a farm, let's say. What does that look like? That farmer has to provide this on his property or a location off premise?
Right, so and just, to follow up to what your colleague asked earlier, it really depends on the farmer. Some of them do have facilities on their property where they will house individuals. Some of them may rent something down the street.
Okay, so they can go out in the market and find rental property?
Correct, yes, sir.
The other thing I had for you was on something the chairman mentioned, was that they cannot change employers. What's the purpose of that? Why can't they change employers to go get a bet? Let's say I'm really good at what I do, and I'm on this program, and I want to go to work for, say, Delegate Pippi, because he's got a lot of money, and he's got a great operation, and I fit his bill. I want to change that.
Yeah.
I change jobs.
Right.
Why is that a relevant piece in this whole
So
thing?
the-
On the H-2 visas, it's a whole different program though, right?
Exactly. So the questions that we were just talking about are about the migrant and seasonal farm worker program. This question, which is a great one about foreign labor certification, that's attached to a visa for an employer. And so it's very employer driven. So that employer has said, I need workers. I'm going to try to find a domestic workforce. I'm going to post that job in the Maryland Workforce Exchange for a couple months. And if I can't find any workers, I still need those workers. And therefore, I'm going to check with the federal government and try to apply for a visa for my specific workforce. So that's kind of the undergirding of why it's a little challenging for somebody to switch, because it's driven by that employer making that request.
So let's say the employer is not a good employer and it's a bad situation for me. I still have that circumstance where I have to go through and file everything, right? If the employer's not a good fit for me.
Yeah, I think that there's probably individual circumstances, but our general understanding of the program is that an individual is here tied to a specific employer, and if they want to switch employers, they would need to return to their home of origin, find a different employment relationship, and then come back. They could not make the switch without going home and getting connected to a new employer first.
Why is that? Why can't I make that switch? Why do I have to go back home if it's a bad situation?
It's really dominated by the federal rules. That's just how the visa system
So
works.
that's because that's the way it is?
It's a federal rule.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to our second panel, which is the Maryland Farm Bureau. We have Tyler Huff, Carl Schlagel. Did I pronounce that right?
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Tyler Huff. I am the Director of Government Affairs for Maryland Farm Bureau, and want to start by thanking you all for the opportunity to come talk about the migrant worker program and the H-2A visa housing today. I'll give a little bit of an overview of Maryland Farm Bureau and the program, and fortunately I have with me Mr. Carl Schlegel. Carl is a board member for us among many other titles, but most importantly, Schlegel Farms utilizes this program and will be able to give a lot of examples on how they utilize the program and hopefully answer questions on that aspect. So for those of you that don't know, Maryland Farm Bureau is a grassroots nonprofit organization that is a representative of the members, or that represents agriculture throughout the state. Our policy is all formatted at the local level, as all 23 of our counties have their own Farm Bureau. There is also us at the State Farm Bureau level, and then in DC is the American Farm Bureau Federation dealing with federal policy. With the aspect of migrant workers and H-2A, I will say H-2A program is in need of reform, but luckily for this committee, that's not something you guys have to worry about. All of that is handled at the federal level. That reform, as far as the visas, the workforce, the streamlining of many of these individuals to get them here quicker, especially when year after year they're coming back to the same operations because they are good at their job and they like what they do, needs to be reformed. But that is something that is going to be handled in DC by the federal legislation, and we have worked on lobbying at that aspect along with the American Farm Bureau Federation. I will say the H-2A program is essential to agriculture in Maryland. There are many farms throughout the state that utilize the program, as we are seeing a shortage in domestic workforce, and there are many of these farms that utilize the same workers year after year. They come back, they're treated like family, they are thought to be family because the relationship is long-standing. You can go from produce operations to nursery and landscape, even to certain row crop and more traditional operations utilizing these farmers and these members. Within Maryland, we have just over 1,400 certified H-2A positions as of 2024. So this is a workforce that is utilized. This is a workforce that is essential for Maryland agriculture. And because of that, those that are utilizing the workforce strive to do everything that they can to make sure that the workers are not only kept to the best of the conditions possible, but also to make sure that those workers want to come back year after year, because that skilled worker is a essential piece to the farm labor workforce, and not having to retrain that individual every year is super beneficial. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Schlegel here, but happy to answer questions at the end.
Madam Vice, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, thanks for having me here today. My name is Carl Schlegel. I am a fruit and vegetable farmer. I farm with my father and two brothers in Charles County, Waldorf. In addition, I am a member of the Maryland Farm Bureau Board of Directors, as well as a member of the Food System Resiliency Council. H-2A labor, the H-2A program, is essential for farmers in the state of Maryland. We have seen significant growth over the past 5 years to 10 years. There is a lack of domestic workforce in this state. We have employed and utilized the H-2A program for the past 20 years on our own farm. In those 20 years, going through the process, searching for domestic workforce, I'd love to tell you that there was zero. Zero sounds good, but that'd be a lie. One. We've had one person who's ever applied, one person who's ever shown up. They didn't make it till lunch on the first day. Farm work's not easy. I don't take anything away from it. And as a society, you know, we always want our children to do better than we did. We want them to go to college. We want them to be doctors. We want them to be lawyers. We want them to be servant leaders. I don't think anybody fills out on the forums when they're having their first child that we want them to go play in the dirt for a living, unless you're one of the 2% of us that do it for a living, and it's a point of pride to have your child still stay and work on the farm with you day in and day out. It's essential. Any food that you might eat, any food that you might get at a restaurant, at some point was probably handled by someone who doesn't use English as their first language. Foreign labor is essential. Now, the H-2A program is governed by the federal government. There's not a whole lot we can do at the state level beyond build understanding of what it needs and what it means to us and how we can utilize it. As far as the housing goes, housing is inspected by Department of Labor. There are a lot of steps. There's a lot of things that we have to go through. There is training that's out there consistently. February the 4th, there is a big joint effort between University of Delaware, Rutgers, and University of Maryland, training down in my neck of the woods in Charles County. In addition to, they've had trainings over on the Eastern Shore, they've had trainings up in New Jersey, because they realize there are more and more farmers that need this program. Talking with my friends, my neighbors, people that farm for a living, it's not big groups of employees that are coming in where they're bringing in and requesting visas for 10 to 20 people. It's a lot of smaller scale beginning farmers that need one person, 2 people to help them out because they can't find the help anymore. It's a necessary program. We have been very fortunate as an organization and as a farm that DOL is not a punitive organization. They want you to do things right. They will hold your hand and walk you through and say, this isn't right, you need to fix this. This is wrong, you need to fix this. You need more time to get this right because it's not right for the worker. Because at the end of the day, doing right by the worker is going to do right by the farmer, is going to do right by me and my family. We're very fortunate. The past 16 years, we've had the same family that has come up consistently. Roberto, Bernardo, Humberto, Brian, Jose. They have consistently come up. They bring their sons, they bring their brothers, they bring their cousins. One guy will take a year off because he wants to get married and start his family. The next cousin comes up to help out. They're very important to us. We have a relationship. I get more Facebook messages on Christmas wishing me Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year than I do during the year from them. I don't get text when they're here, but I get text messages when they're home. So we want to make sure they're safe. We want to make sure they're secure. We want to make sure they're content. We don't want them to live in squalor. We don't want them to feel like they're being abused. We don't want them packed in like they're in Army barracks. Comfort is key. Their dignity is key. I mean, I could probably beleaguer this point to death, but I will refrain and open myself up to any questions that you guys have.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, Mr. Schlegel, I commend you on running a well-run business, because in some time in my tenure, I remember listening about migrant and seasonal farm workers, and it was not as perfect as you portray your business. So thank you for that. With that said, you mentioned how the H-2A employees are essential. I was just curious what the ratio is at your farm as far as domestic workers versus H-2A workers. So
currently we utilize 8 workers that come up for us during the season. We typically run 2 contracts, 4 early, 4 mid-season, and then they run through till about November or December. Besides my 2 brothers, myself, my father, and then my brother and sister who have off-the-farm jobs who help out here and there where they can. The only other labor that we have would be market help. So the typically high school kids that go to farmers markets with us or might help pack stuff on Fridays to get things ready. The law's very specific in the contracts that we write for H-2A about what they can do and what they can't do. Working with the public is kind of not what they're supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be the picking, the packing, the things to make the crop grow.
I had asked the question from the previous panel about the process when it came to changing employers, but for you, how long the average process is when you get these H-2A employees? So
we've been doing paperwork since before Christmas. First, obviously showing the need, which it's the same need as it was for the past 15 years. Then we go through the housing inspection. We utilize a law firm that specializes in writing the contracts and going through the myriad of government agencies. I think you go through 4 agencies right now at the federal government level, DOL, Homeland Security, immigration, plus you're going to deal with State Department at the consulate because they have to be interviewed down in Mexico. So we deal with all of those, and we've been dealing with it since before Christmas for a target date of March the 20th.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Delegate Weigel?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So, Mr. Schlegel, the condition you described, actually I have a constituent who came to us last fall. He's had a family, H-2A workers, come to him year after year after year, the father, the grandfather, the sons. But this past fall, he had trouble getting them on site to harvest their crops. He's an orchardist. Is there any assistance available to these employers to help with the process, or do you just hire your own attorneys and do your own thing?
So a few years ago, many years ago, I remember Dad tried to go through and do all the paperwork himself, and it was very much a hair-pulling incident. And from us, as we have matured as a business, let's say, the risk mitigation of using an attorney, someone who specializes in this, who understands this, has been beneficial to us to make sure that all of the, the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. At the end of the day, we have hard targets of when we need those workers here, and we can't run the risk of messing up that one piece of paperwork that pushes us back. Unfortunately, tomatoes, they don't wait. Yeah. They're going to turn red when they want to turn red. So it's a necessary expense, unfortunately, that we have to spend. And I know it's a situation where, go back to COVID, 2020, when they were coming through and we were coming through COVID and the world's just shutting down, everyone had contracts to go out for laborers to come into the country. And it was, are they going to be able to cross the border? And then all of a sudden, they shut the consulates down. And we got word of, if you have anybody that's got a visa that needs to be renewed this year, they're not going to be allowed to come in country. If they're a new worker to this country, they're not going to come in. We are dealing only with workers who have established precedents working in the country, people that we know, that we can vet very quickly so that we can keep health and security at a stamp.
So your returning workers, they have to go through the same process year after year, or is the renewal process easier than the initial?
It is year after year. There has been, so the H-2A program goes back to 1984. There has been no meaningful legislation at the federal level to update the program.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Charkoudian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I'm trying to, so the housing is required. Is it deducted out of wages as well, or is it required like on top of what the wage standards are? How does that work?
No, ma'am. That is a cost that we, as the employer, eat. So this past year, the H-2A wage, which is mandated, the wage is mandated by the federal government as well, was $17.86.
1842.
1842, sorry. Even I get it messed up. I don't do the payroll, Mom does the payroll.
No worries.
Which is an unrealistic number because it doesn't factor in all the money that took them to get them into country, doesn't factor the money to pull the visas, doesn't factor the $600 per worker asylum fee that the previous administration placed on it. And then you deal with the housing. So realistically, most H-2A workers in this country, in this state, you figure they're at a hourly wage of $28 to $30 an hour because of the housing that goes into it.
Wait, so, sorry, I'm just trying to do the math. So before the housing, so there's a wage that's guaranteed by the federal government as part of the visa program, and that is $18.26 a month. Is that what that is?
So that is, and I'm blanking on the name of the program, but it varies by state. And that wage rate is set by the federal government and varies by state. And Maryland's last year, I believe, was $18.42.
That's a monthly, is it?
Hourly rate.
Oh, $18.
$18.42 an hour.
Okay, $18, okay, sorry, now I'm with you. Okay, and then out of that, there's not expenses taken out of that. You're saying housing is above and beyond that?
Yes, ma'am, that is their money.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions from the members? Seeing none, thank you very much for this panel. Our next panel will be the Maryland Legal Aid, MLA, and the CDM, which is the Centro de los Derechos del Migrante. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
We have Cornelia Bright Gordon, Viola Woolams, Nohora Rivero, Ana Maria Lema Olivares, and Ricardo Ortiz. Very rare do I get to do the rolling R's. I'm excited. You may begin when you're ready.
I will go first. Go ahead. Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Ricardo Ortiz. I work with Centro de los Derechos del Migrante, or CDM. We are a transnational organization based here in Maryland in the charm city of Baltimore. And for the past 2 decades, we have worked across borders in Mexico and the US to ensure migrant workers have the information, tools, and the power they need to improve their working conditions. We accompany migrant workers from their hometowns to their US work sites through legal advocacy, community education, leadership development, and policy change. We also have offices in Mexico and a worker hotline where everyday migrant and immigrant workers call us to ask questions and report problems. Because of this work, we see how temporary visa programs work in real life. H-2 visas were designed to meet specific labor needs. While they promise legal temporary employment, many workers arrive already in debt, isolated, and afraid to report problems for fear of losing their jobs. In practice, these programs create extreme dependence on employers, increasing the risk of labor abuses. The H-2A programs cover agricultural work and has no cap on visas. On paper, it provides important rights, including disclosure of working conditions, wages, transportations, and free housing. And we highlight housing in red because last year, the federal administration approved new rules that now allow housing charges, and we will discuss this in more detail later. And so we can talk about H-2B. In contrast, H-2B program is for non-agricultural work. Here in Maryland, for example, we know people who come to work as scrap workers, at fairs and landscaping and other jobs. The H-2B program is limited by an annual cap set by Congress. It also explicitly excludes workers from access to legal services funded by the Legal Services Corporation. This exclusion leaves thousands of workers without effective protection against abuse. And unlike H-2A, H-2B workers must pay for their own housing. H-2B programs are often described as a win-win. Workers earn more there in their home countries, and employers get the labor they need. But for more than 20 years, we have documented that while some rights exist on paper, the real problem is enforcement. Access to these rights depends on whether workers dare to report abuse, and reporting can mean losing their job, their housing, and the chance to return to work the next year. Since October, H-2A workers had faced one of the most serious wage cuts in recent years. The Trump administration announced regulatory changes that significantly reduce wages and shift housing costs onto workers. This creates economic incentives to prefer H-2A labor. This is concerning because it may increase demand for H-2A workers and works in housing. And without inspections, living conditions will continue to get worse. We expect to see this clearly in the upcoming season. Now, I want to share findings from our report, Ripe for Reform, published in 2020. Once workers arrive in the US, their dependence on the employer increases. Most live in employer-provided housing, often isolated locations. This turns housing into a tool of labor and personal control. Workers told us they are not allowed to have visitors or even leave without permission to run backseat errands or go to the doctor. 45% of the workers we interview live in overcrowded or unsanitary conditions. This included people sleeping on the floor or sharing beds, infestation of rats or bed bugs, poor ventilation, and extreme heat. Even though the law requires housing inspections before workers move in, the U.S. Department of Labor data shows there are not enough resources to inspect even one labor camp per state. When real inspections do not exist, complaints becomes optional. This explains why bad living conditions are so common. And these problems are not limited to agricultural housing. We identified similar conditions among H-2B workers and specific craft workers, many of them women. Some live in overcrowded housing, such as 18 workers live in a 3-bedroom house with limited access to 2 bathrooms and shared kitchen. Others live in poor condition or with leaking roofs. H-2B workers are subject of housing deductions even when they are not working the hours promised in their contracts. They earn just enough to pay rent. Some workers report collectively paying more than $4,320 per month for a 3-bedroom house in Hooper Island on the Eastern Shore. And I have a video here that you can see how workers live in these conditions. I can play right now, but I will be happy to share with all of you to see how workers live. For more details, also, you can review report Breaking the Shell. It reflects the issue I outlined today. I provided each of you with a copy so you can review the findings. And I would like to share a few additional observations about federal level trends that are likely to have a direct impact on migrant workers here in our state. We are seeing bipartisan efforts to expand guest worker program, such as a proposal to make H-2A year-round and open it to other industry, and to create new loopholes in the H-2B cap for certain sectors, including seafood. At the same time, these expansions efforts include little to no focus on better worker protections. If these programs are allowed to grow without stronger safeguards, overcrowding and overall housing conditions for migrant workers are likely to worsen at the local level. We are also seeing a rollback of rules that will have allowed workers to have guests and employer-provided housing, one of the few ways they can access to legal and health services. I really appreciate the opportunity to testify today at a time when federal policy is moving to expand and deregulate H-2A programs, lowering wages and weakening housing protection. Maryland has the opportunity to lead. The H-2 program is not a win-win. It is a system and urgent need to reform, and we are ready to work with you to improve conditions and protect workers here in our beautiful state of Maryland. Thank you.
Greetings, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the Economic Matters Committee. My name is Cornelia Bright Gordon. I am the Director of Advocacy for Administrative Law at Maryland Legal Aid. We are a nonprofit law firm that provides free legal services to the state's low-income and vulnerable residents. Our 12 offices serve residents in each of Maryland's 24 jurisdictions, and we handle a range of civil legal matters, including housing, health, bankruptcy, consumer, family law. Maryland Legal Aid has provided representation, legal education, and outreach to migrant farm workers for more than 45 years. We thank the committee for the opportunity to be present today. Together, farmers and their employees, including migrant farm workers, feed everyone in the state. Our clients return year after year, and they know us well. We visit migrant farm workers in each county in the state. north, south, east, west. Each year, we make approximately 500 visits for more than 350 workers. Now, the law I've attached for your, I anticipated some of your questions, perhaps not all of them, but I've attached for you a law sheet, which will answer the questions in terms of what does the law require for the housing, and where to find it. And that will be the third page of your sheet from Maryland Legal Aid. The Migrant Seasonal and Protection Act represents a careful balance, an attempt at a careful balance between the interests of U.S. workers, growers, and visa-holding guest workers, and to assure necessary protections for migrant and seasonal agricultural workers. That is Congress, those are Congress's words. Congress believes that the migrant workers need protection. By request of this committee, our presentation today is limited to the topics of housing. We'd love to return and talk about some other issues for the migrant farm workers. In order to address housing, we also explain the requirements related to access. And if you have questions, we are prepared to talk about the new federal adverse wage rate methodology regulations, which have been referred to you by CDM. Maryland Legal Aid brought the first and only seminal case on farm worker access in the major case that is cited all over the country, regularly, Rivero and Legal Aid Bureau versus Montgomery County, Maryland. In that case, the federal court held that the First Amendment to the United States Constitution and Article 40 of the Maryland Declaration of Rights provide free speech requirements and free access between migrant farm workers and their legal outreach advocates, including Maryland Legal Aid. Despite this, we have been denied access. Even our executive director was kicked off a farm in October and told that we could not be present. Nora Rivero is present and will testify before the committee today. She's sitting here to my left. Please find in my testimony the legal requirements related to the issues requested by you. And I've divided them up between the housing rules, access to the outreach worker, and from the access to from the legal aid to the migrant farm worker. In fact, the federal court did state in the Rivero case that the First Amendment flows both ways. It's not just a matter of the farm worker having access to educational information about their rights, but it's also the right of legal aid to attend upon the migrants who we know and visit regularly to give that information, education, and legal advice. Thank you for the opportunity to share this testimony. Nora Rivero will follow up with her testimony subsequently.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Nora Rivero, and I work with Maryland Legal Aid serving the farm workers for 33 years across the entire state. Over the last 5 years, we have talked to around 1,500 workers, and I'm here today because I want to share some concerns about the housing conditions they provide to H-2A workers. The conditions fall short of the legal federal and state regulation and directly affect the workers' health, safety, and dignity. When I began this work, my first visit was in Westover in Somerset County, and I met there some workers returning home from working long hours and the place that they have to live, it was a small space that served for bedroom and kitchen. That experience, that experience stayed with me, and still it helps me for my advocacy. While improvement has occurred, housing for farm workers who remain invisible despite the important essential role that they play in the Maryland agricultural economic. Conditions still fall short and of basic legal and humane standards. As I say, farm workers are essential to Maryland agricultural economic. The federal law recognizes this by requiring employers to provide a safe, sanitary, and properly maintained housing. Unfortunately, the conditions we continue to observe demonstrate a travel partner, the insufficient, you understand, insufficient maintenance, overcrowding, and restricted living conditions. During the visits, we have observed units with serious maintenance deficiency. In one residence that we visited, there was a substantial portion of the ceiling that was missing, and the interior was exposed, and it was covered with a black plastic. This condition is inconsistent with the regulation that required to have a structure sound, weather-tight, and maintained in a good repair. Maryland and federal and Maryland state, they have some requirements, but these requirements has not been met in some of the camps. This condition exposed the workers to the moisture, mold, pests, and temperature extreme, creating clear health and safety risk. We also observe uneven and loose carpeting and a creaking floor, creating the possibility of an accident of falling. And OSHA standards require that the floor of the labor housing should be free of problems, solid, durable, and maintained safe in the safest way. The camps that we visit, we have seen overcrowded. 35% of the camps that we had visited were overcrowded. We found workers sleeping in the family room, on the living room, and hallway, and we found the dining room divided with curtains to make a space to sleep. This small place, because it's not the 50 square feet that is required, and there is no space for sitting or relaxing. As well, the federal and state require this, but it's not met either. This overcrowd condition also results in lack of privacy, undermining basic dignity and rest, which are essential to workers' health and productivity. In one mobile house, we have inadequate insulation, making the dining and living areas unbearable for hot during the day and uncomfortable cold at night. We felt the drafts through the thin glass window, and through the insulation, the pull seal of the doors. OSHA say that they require heating, insulation, and ventilation. This condition increase humidity, limit ventilation, and contribute to respiratory and other health risks. We also found that the farm workers, they don't have a space to store the groceries or the personal items. Farm workers, they keep the groceries on the floor, on the counter, on the dining table, eliminating a space for dining and eliminating a space for a safe cook in the kitchen. They also keep bottles of water in the living room, and the personal items, they keep it in the suitcase. It's difficult for workers to store groceries safely and maintain sanitary conditions. The federal H2A regulation require adequate storage for the farm workers. There is a hotel that houses farm workers, and the residents, they are not allowed to be outside the room in the premises. If they want to fresh air, they have to move and go far away from the hotel. And this restriction limits workers' freedom of movement and access to safe outdoor space. Finally, in some houses, we find no trespassing signs and restrict the access. It prevents the farm workers, me in this case, visiting farm workers, verify the weather, the housing condition. We cannot talk to them about their rights, and that is not that the SPA or the federal law wants in the inspection. The conditions are not isolated incidents. They reflect systematic gaps in oversight, enforcement, and accountability. Farm workers who sustain Maryland agricultural economy should not be forced to live in unsafe or degrading conditions. Respectfully urge the committee to strengthen enforcement of existing federal and state housing standards, ensure regular, meaningful inspection of farm worker housing, protect access for outreach and legal service provider, support measures that promote safe, dignified housing for all farm workers. Thank you for the opportunity to share this testimony and for your commitment to protecting the workers who feed our state.
Will you be speaking as well, ma'am?
No.
No, Chair. No, okay, so everyone has testified.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera, for your testimony. I'm sorry to hear those conditions for those workers. So as you may know, housing and land zone use is new to this committee, as it used to be heard in Environment and Transportation. So I don't proceed to pretend to know everything about housing. With that said, I was looking at, I don't know if this is something you can answer because I know these programs are federally run. I'm looking at your slide about the H2A and the H2B, and just curious the significance and difference, how H2A, their rights include disclosure, wages, transportation, free housing, whereas H2B, one of their, well, not rights, would be they have to pay for their own housing. So the scenario that you just explained to us, the horrendous living conditions, is that a cause of the workers have to pay for their housing, but is that housing provided by the employer, or they're forced to find housing that they can afford? I just want to be clear.
No, thank you, Chair, for the question. The law not necessarily requires the employer to provide housing. Yes, thank you for the question. The law not necessarily ask the employer to provide housing. The worker can find a house, but as you can imagine, many of the migrant workers don't have, for example, access to the language, and also to rent a house, they need some requirements they don't necessarily have. So what we are seeing is the employer provide the house for H-2B workers. And the difference between H-2A and H-2B is basically H-2A is agricultural and the rest is H-2B. And for H-2B, they have to pay the house. So yeah, basically, we see the employer provide the house and they have to pay them.
And if I could add, Madam Chair, the H-2A, as CDM is alerting you, the H-2A program formerly required the grower to provide free housing for the workers. That changed. A new regulation has been passed by the federal government that is going to permit growers all over the country to take part of their salary from them and apply it to the housing. We are going to, that's being tested. There are various lawsuits that have been filed about it, but that's the law now. It's a regulation, it's not a statute. How that plays out is going to be seen. As it is now, much of the housing is poor and does not comply with the regulations. The Department of Labor has and most, Federal Department of Labor and the OSHA administration has very, very significant rules relating to what the housing is supposed to be like. And Mrs. Rivero described, everything that she described is a violation of those rules.
So that was going to be my follow-up, is that there are regs that are not being enforced.
Correct.
Basically.
And if you look at the law sheet, I list them out for you.
Right. Thank you very much. Delegate Weigel.
Madam Chairwoman, the previous panel had talked about the $18.42 an hour, but you guys are saying wages have been reduced. I saw where you talked about that in your presentation, but they also said it varies by state. So are these workers subject to the various minimum wages in the various states? Are you suggesting it's gone below the $18.42 an hour? Or?
I suspect it will. There's a new rule, it's called.
No, Ms. Ortiz, you said wages have been reduced. So what have they been reduced to below the $18.42 an hour?
Yes, I can review the information and I will be happy to share with you after the hearing, if it is okay with you. I don't have the exactly number right now, but I know we have this number and they definitely will be.
And then, so the feds are now allowing charges for under the H-2A, I guess, they're now allowing them to be charged for housing, whereas before the housing was provided in addition to the minimum wage. Is that what you stated?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes to both statements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll go in the order of Delegate Bandari, then Ahrens, and then Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given that the visa employer controlled, as your slide says, what real protections does a worker have to report wage theft, unsafe conditions, or abuse without risking immediate job loss or deportation?
Yes, I can share a little bit more. So something that it's very important to understand is basically the worker is attached to the employer. So if they speak out, usually the employer say, well, you have to return to home. And what I see here in Maryland is if you want to report in the Maryland Department of Labor, you have a form where you have to write your name, and that makes workers afraid to say something because the employer can see their name. And unfortunately, this H-2 visas is if you are a good worker, you can come back next year. But if you are a bad worker, forget next year. And we have a list where we can share with the rest of the employers that you are a bad worker. So that's why we see so many people don't speak up about the rights. And I'm not sure if anyone from...
So I'd like to add to that. We're seeing more and more no trespass signs, and we're being turned away, which is why I broached the access law, because we can't look at their housing if we can't get access to the farm workers. More and more farm workers are also sharing with our paralegals, and Nora's a law graduate, that they're afraid. They're afraid to see us, and they're afraid that they're going to be punished. And how do they get punished? They can't come back, or they'll lose their job. Most of our clients that we see, and like Nora said, she's seen more than 1,500 people over the past couple of years. They're out every weekend going to many, many labor camps. And there's more and more occasions where our clients are indicating that they've been told that they can't talk to us. They're threatened, and they're threatened with their jobs.
Thank you.
Did you want to add anything? Okay.
With legal aid, thank you for coming. Housing's a big issue across the board for a lot. I'm kind of confused on, you just mentioned a couple of things. First of all, I was going to ask you how many cases you handle a year, but you said thousands or something. Is that correct?
We do 3 activities, at least. We go to visit the farm workers, and we provide them with legal education. These are know your rights. And both of the paralegals speak Spanish, and they give them their rights. That's not only how much they have a right to make hourly, but also that they have a right to talk to advocates such as ourselves. We even give them, taxes are taken out of their paycheck. So we even give them advice about that.
These are H-2 visas you're talking about.
H-2A.
Okay, so H-2A. So that's a federal program. So the federal government, doesn't the federal government set those wages and set that criteria?
Yes, but with an explanation, because Maryland has.
So you're saying that when you go to that site, and I'm an H-2A visa person, I may not be getting the wage I'm due because of what?
Employers commit wage violations, wage theft, and/or error many different ways in the state. I mean,
so these employers are deliberately defrauding these people, is what you're saying?
They can.
Okay. So, and you said how many cases you handle a year?
We see at least more than 350 migrant workers a year.
Okay.
But we see them multiple times, especially if they're reporting problems, we go back. So we're making more than 550 visits a year.
Okay, how many other groups do this legal aid type thing? How many other nonprofits do what you do? Is there a lot?
No, it's just us.
Oh, just you? Okay, how do you get your funding?
Well, we have various sources of funds at Maryland Legal Aid, and the farm worker program is a grant.
A grant.
But we also have donations. We have government contracts. We have lots of different sources of funds.
Do you receive, if you try a case, if you bring a case to, and let's say I'm the farmer and I'm guilty of something, and I have to pay a fine, do you receive money for that?
No. We provide free legal services. We don't get paid.
Free legal services, okay. Wait, there was one other thing I wanted to ask.
We don't get paid legal fees.
Okay.
I get paid, but it's because we're a nonprofit, and we have various sources of funds like contracts, grants, donations.
Okay. So I guess then, I guess when I was asking how many cases do you go out and pursue versus you get calls? And how do you get a call from somebody that may not be here have phone access or something like that? How do you determine that? Do you go out to the farms And are you permitted to go on the farm to talk to people? Is that a right you have to do?
It is a right we have to do. Usually we do outreach. We don't get that many calls, but we can get a call. We have WhatsApp on our phones, and most of the farm workers, in fact, most of the people in the world are using WhatsApp now who live in other countries, but we do visit the farms, but sometimes we're not allowed to visit.
Okay, well, I wouldn't understand why you're not allowed to. Are you impacting work? Or I would think it was, they should be able to see you. You're not going in during working hours, are you?
No, sir, we're not. We go on the weekends.
How many cases
and
did
after
you, how many
hours.
cases did you win? Do you actually come out, do you find a problem with, and the government is wrong or the employer is wrong? How many have you found?
How many violations do we
What's the
find?
violations that were verifiable and you actually came out and fixed? How many did you do last year?
We go every weekend.
How many
but
did you fix? How many did you find a problem with and you found a resolve and you actually corrected the problem?
We are having trouble correcting problems because we have been denied access in a number of places.
Is that a federal issue or is that a local issue?
It's a local issue.
So it's a federal program, but local jurisdiction?
I believe that, I think that it's, the information you've received is a little bit limited. The visa program and the H-2A program are federal programs, but they are state programs as well. You heard from the Department of Labor first. They're the ones that do the pre-occupancy inspections. They are controlling the program from a state perspective as well. So it's not just a federal program, it's a state program too.
So the state actually hires, the state is responsible for some of this? I didn't know that. I thought this was just federal.
It's not just federal.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm learning.
Do you want to add anything?
We'll have Delegate Howard, then Vice Chair Shakudian, then Delegate Fennell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just very quickly, what kind of punitive actions can be taken by the state when you find a farm that's in violation of housing or wage? What kind of punitive actions can the state take?
The state can,
So like license revocations or
they can contact the federal government so that the visas can be revoked. They also have.
No, I mean against the farmer. Like if there's someone that's in violation.
That's the farmer
Okay.
gets the visas for the workers.
Mm-hmm.
And also the state is the one that inspects the housing. You know, the federal government isn't sending people down on farms on the Eastern Shore to inspect migrant farm worker housing. And the state has the ability to cite the grower for unsafe housing, or housing that's not compliant with federal rules.
Is that finable, other than removing a license? Is that a finable offense? Is that?
Can I get back to you on that? I wasn't prepared to that, but what I've been doing quite a bit of research preparing for that, for this presentation.
And I'm new, so.
But I didn't look to the extent of the fines, but what I did see, and what I do know, is that the housing can be found to be not compatible with the rules. It's unsafe housing.
And I just want to see what the repercussions would be. And then also too, just as a quick follow-up and as an aside.
Can I get back to you and I'll file that with the chair?
But as far, and the second part would be, as far as the reporting is concerned, are you saying that there is no way to, for a worker to contact you and you request that their identity be shielded should there be any type of court action? And are you saying that there's no way that a worker be able to contact labor and request that their identity be shielded, or that there's no way to anonymously report either through one worker to another? You know, so you have, two farms, right? A and B. So you have workers on farm B. Maybe he has a friend, she has a friend on farm A. It says, I'm scared, which I think is legitimate, right? To talk about some of these conditions or maybe something's going on. I want you to call for me on my behalf. There's no way to, there's no not animosity, I'm sorry, but there's no.
To anonymize their.
Yeah, thank you very much, yeah.
I'll tell you, I've been representing folks for more than 40 years of people who have different kind of status.
Sure.
And all of these folks have status. They are not undocumented. I want to be clear. And being fearful of filing reports is fairly consistent across communities. Now, is
But
it
you filed
possible to
on their
file
behalf.
a Jane Doe or a John Doe case?
Yeah.
If we were in court, it is possible to do that if we filed a lawsuit.
Okay.
I have not been, to answer Delegate Arnaz's question, I have not been filing lawsuits. I would rather work with.
Sure, yeah.
Work with organizations.
Sure.
To accomplish a goal. Lawsuits are expensive and they're lengthy, and we want people to be safe now, okay? But when you file, I just want to truly answer your question, but when you file a complaint with a state agency, a government agency or federal agency, it's much more difficult to anonymize the individual. And many agencies won't even accept a complaint unless you come forth with a name.
What if you filed on their behalf?
In a case in my name?
Yeah, you represent them. You said you act as their agent. You're their.
Well, we
your
are
client.
counsel.
Right.
I have attempted to file civil rights complaints with agencies and other kinds of complaints with agencies. And at some point in time, I've had to divulge the client's name. They will not undertake the investigation.
Is that
So I'm
both at
trying
the
to be
state and
honest
federal
with
level?
you. It's just you're dealing with the government.
Sure.
It
At
is
both
very,
levels, though,
very
at the state and federal
different than
level?
filing a lawsuit.
But is that at the state and federal level?
Yes, it has been.
Okay.
Now, if I can go out tomorrow and get one done, maybe, and someone prove me wrong, I'd be thrilled.
Okay. I'll follow up with labor also too, but and I'll follow up with you as well, so.
And you asked me, tell you if it's possible for someone to call. People, yes, it is possible, and they have called our Lower Shore office before. Many of these people come back year after year. They all live in the same community.
Yeah, they all, it's
Most of
small
them
world, I get it.
they are related. Their uncle comes next year, their cousin comes next year.
Yeah.
This is how they feed their families, and they trust not only the grower to pay them so that they can pay their, take care of their family, but they trust Nora.
Sure.
And they've known Nora, many of them, for decades. Can they call her? Yeah, they have her cell phone, and they frequently can call on WhatsApp. Do they call? They don't call that often. We find out by doing outreach.
Delegate Howard, was your question answered?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
thank you, Ms.
I'll
Gordon.
do some
for that.
follow-ups.
Yes,
Thank you,
thank you.
Madam Chair.
I just want to remind the members, so we have gotten kind of over with the panel presentation and questions, but in the interest of getting everyone's questions answered, Delegate Fennell, Delegate Pippi, and we'll have wrap up with Vice Chair Charkoudian.
When someone else asks a question, you answer.
My question is in reference to, you said in reference to the no trespassing and accessibility. I mean, Tim, can you explain that, and then how can, in your opinion, that could be rectified?
We're seeing more and more no trespassing signs. The signs are put up by the grower, and it is a keep out sign. I want to rectify it. This year, I'm going to do something different. We're going to see if it will help. I'm going to send a letter to every grower in the state that is on the program. And I'm going to say, we're coming to visit. Here's the law that allows us to visit. Now, this is not typically done because they know the answer. We've been there, coming there for years, sometimes decades. Nora's been doing this 33 years. And she has an attorney general's opinion that she brings with her. But we did have to file a lawsuit. And it was a big lawsuit. The ACLU actually represented Nora. We didn't file it ourselves. And the federal court was very, very clear In fact, the federal court instructed the police department in Montgomery County that what they were doing was wrong because they threatened to arrest her. Okay? What can be done? We're living under some very scary times now. And staff are scared too. I hope that's the best answer I can give you right now.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Appreciate that. Please, let's follow up, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Delegate Pippy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to point out, housing is obviously new to this committee. Now, I'm an attorney. I do some landlord-tenant work, so I'm somewhat familiar with this issue in Maryland. So is the presentation about the fact that these H-2A participants are not providing a warranty of habitability?
No.
Okay. And then the second part is the presentation about the fact that these participants are not complying with the H-2A housing standards for rental and public accommodations from the Department of Labor?
Yes.
Okay. So
Department of Health, Federal Department of Labor, and OSHA.
yeah, so I'm looking at the checklist here of, it's very specific. So it says like 50 square feet per person, ceilings have to be 7 feet high, storage facilities, things have to be 36. This is very specific.
Very specific.
And this is good, is the argument that you believe, whether because you've seen it in person, somebody up here, that there are just a lot of these folks not complying with what has been a requirement, federal requirement?
They have not.
They have not, okay. So then, and I'll let it be, but do you have a suggestion, I'm assuming, because we usually don't hear presentations unless there's a bill coming of some sort. So do you have a suggestion of what is going to make, is there an ask this year that's coming that we're going to see at some point?
No, you all asked us to come. This is the first time it's ever happened.
Yeah, well, there's usually a reason for that. Okay, yeah, okay. Fair enough. Thank you for answering the questions. We'll get to that part, but I appreciate you answering those. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Pippy. We'll wrap up with Vice Chair Charkoudian.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and for all of your work advocating for folks to have safe and healthy housing. And I actually really am along the same lines as Delegate Pippy on most of this, which is this question about what can we do. So if I'm following correctly, there's enough state and federal multi-agency violation. The law is there at the federal level, at the state level, in housing code, in health code, in a bunch of different places. And so it seems like you're saying that we have the protections in law and there's an enforcement problem. Is that right? Or do we need to change the standards in the law?
No, I would not advocate for a change in standards.
Okay, so we have an enforcement
The standards
problem.
were imposed by actually Congress and the Federal Department of Labor. And you're right, they are very, very specific, but they're all safety. Just like there's safety rules for people that work here and put your lights in and we change the light bulbs and what so they're all safety rules.
I think because housing is new, and I think to some extent this was also Delegate Weibel's question about like what are the standards that apply? Are the standards related to like what rental housing, standards apply, right? Those. So I think it's, if I'm following this, I think, let me ask it this way.
A very narrow question about this housing.
Okay, let me ask it this way. If we wanted to fix the problem, would we change our standards? Would we change enforcement? Would we change trespassing rules? What would we change if we wanted to fix this problem?
The trespassing, Maryland has never passed a statute. There are a lot of other states that actually have a statute that says that migrant farm workers have a right to receive visitors. There is law in Maryland about rental housing, that people who rent housing have a right to receive visitors. But there is no law. There's no statute, but the law is case law, and it's been applied all over the country, but we don't have a statute, no.
So one possible fix would be to explicitly put in state law that migrant workers have a right to receive visitors.
That's correct.
That would be one possible fix. Is the Department of Labor sufficiently staffed to be able to do the enforcement? Do they need more people doing enforcement? Is that the issue?
Until today, I did not know they were doing any inspections.
Okay, and do we know if the inspections, we can ask them later, are the inspections only complaint-based, as is the case with like prevailing wage, for example, or are they doing proactive inspections? Do we know? You don't know?
Until today, I did not know they were
nod
doing
or shake their heads at me, or tell me later. Okay.
I believe if there was inspection, maybe we will not have found so many problems.
Yeah, so I think that the request that you're hearing from me for sure, and possibly from other members, is to everyone who's here, I mean, I guess we're going to hear from other folks, is it is certainly concerning, and it would be helpful, especially because the topic area is new to us, if we can narrow down a couple of very specific ways that we might make a change that would be able to address some of the really alarming things that you're sharing with us. Thank you.
Yeah, can I add something? I think enforcement it will be something important. Also, language access, because if you call the Maryland Department of Labor, I try to call, I speak Spanish. Spanish is my first language. And when I call the person who speaks Spanish, the message is only in English. So how can I believe or I can make a complaint if I don't hear anything in my own language? And so many of the people who came here to work are people from Mexico, Guatemala, different part of the world, even IT. So we need this access, and I think it will be great to have more people in the Maryland Department of Labor who really do this kind of work, because maybe they can tell us how many people have outreach the last couple of years. You know, this is so important, and we see, for example, in Eastern Shore, they are paying so many money for just work, you know, but yes, I just had enforcement will be something very important, and happy to follow up this and see how we can fix this issue in Maryland.
Thank you so much. I will say before we move to the last panel, Mr. Ortiz, you mentioned in the beginning of your testimony that you had a video. If you would
Yes.
kindly share that with the members of the committee at your earliest convenience, we'd appreciate
Definitely.
it.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Thank you so
Madam
much
Chair,
for
may I
coming.
just say one closing statement?
Sure.
Thank you for being so kind, because you didn't have to say yes. This is, to look at this selfishly, it's not just about the farm worker. Every time you reach for an apple in the grocery store and you put it in your cart, or you pick a tomato, or you put a watermelon, and you slice it open and feed your kids, you want somebody who's had health and safety regulations applied to their benefit. It keeps us safe. So please remember that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Members, our last panel, I'll just be mindful that we have set a lot of time, so if you have questions, make sure they're concise and brief. Our last panel is Devon Payne Sturgis. Devon? Devin? Oh, I'm sorry.
Devin.
Devin.
Yes.
My apologies.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see if I can.
I'm sorry, Dr. Payne Sturgis.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Make sure everybody can hear me. All right. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Madam Vice Chair and members of the House Economic Matters Committee. My name is Dr. Devin Payne Sturgis. I am Professor of Environmental Health Sciences with the University of Michigan School of Public Health, but formerly I was on faculty at the University of Maryland in College Park. I have more than 20 years of experience in public health research, policy, and practice. I'm also PI for a 5-year NIH-funded interdisciplinary research project called Respirar, examining the health and housing conditions of migrant seasonal farm workers in the mid-Atlantic states where farm worker experiences are understudied. Our intensive fieldwork in collaboration with a grassroots organization called CATA, also known as the Farm Worker Support Committee, has centered on Maryland's Eastern Shore. CATA is headquartered in New Jersey, but also has offices in Salisbury, Maryland, and has been doing grassroots outreach work with migrant seasonal farm workers for more than 2 decades. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys this afternoon. I just want to make a note that I have no disclosures to report here. And for my brief presentation, I'm going to focus on the key findings from our fieldwork and our evaluation of Maryland Department of Labor housing inspection report we obtained through a Public Information Act request. So for Respirar, the overarching goal of our research is to understand why migrant and seasonal farm workers may face increased risk of infectious respiratory illness and generate practical solutions to inform policies and best practices to protect their health. For AIM-1 of our project, we conducted an intensive public health study during the 2023 and 2024 growing seasons throughout Maryland's Eastern Shore. Our team collaborated with CATA and farm workers to assess farm worker housing conditions, indoor air quality, and respiratory health. As part of that work, we collected baseline data on participant demographics, work, wage, and housing characteristics. And so for this presentation, I'm just going to share some of those preliminary findings. And just a little bit about our participant recruitment. We identified housing locations from publicly available information posted on the U.S. Department of Labor's H-2A housing disclosure files, as well as gathering information from our community partner, CATA. To be eligible to participate in our study, individuals had to be over 18 years of age, had to be currently employed in farm work, migrating for that farm work here in Maryland, and residing in migrant labor housing or at a migrant labor camp. 135 participants enrolled in our study across 14 unique farm worker housing locations in 7 out of the 9 Eastern Shore counties. We visited each participant once a week for over 14 weeks during both of these growing seasons, 2023 and 2024. So to give you a little bit about who are these participants, this also gives you a sense of who are migrant seasonal farm workers on the Eastern Shore. So the majority of our study participants were male, 90%, and a majority at 82% were married or had a partner and a family that they were supporting back in their home communities. While most participants were from Mexico at 82%, a substantial proportion were from Haiti at 16%. While the majority of our participants were employed through the H-2A program, which you've been hearing a lot about, at nearly 78%, nearly 15% had work authorization as temporary protected status beneficiaries. Nearly half of our study participants were veteran migrant seasonal farm workers. 48% of our study participants have been returning to Maryland for seasonal farm work every year for more than 8 years, and many reported working for the same employer. All of our farm workers in our study were paid by the hour. Slightly more than 2/3 of our participants were paid $16 an hour or more, and this tracks with what was the adverse effect wage rate for the state of Maryland at that time. A quarter were paid between $10 and $16 an hour, while 1.5% reported being paid under $8 an hour, which of course is well below Maryland's $15 an hour minimum wage. In terms of types of crops, our participants worked to cultivate and harvest. Most of our study participants worked on nursery and landscape plantings, and the next most common crop were watermelons, and they're really good. Study participants lived in a variety of housing types, so I'm showing you some images here to give you a sense of that. While 77% lived in labor camps, with either like sort of barrack-style units or on locations with multiple buildings, all in one spot where many workers were being housed. 24% lived in what I call single-family homes or, detached standalone houses. 4.4% lived in trailers or mobile homes. 3.7% lived in motels. Overwhelmingly, like 96% of the housing for our study participants, as reported by them, was owned, controlled, and or provided by their employer. And when asked if the participants chose to live at the location that they were living in at the moment, half of them said no. Only 3.7% reported they paid for housing, and this was mostly among the non-H-2A migrant workers living in trailers with 4 to 5 persons per trailer. The average monthly rent for these participants, they were reporting to us, was $210 a month. So on to amenities. So while a majority have reported having sort of the basic amenities, such as hot and cold water, a toilet, shower, tub, refrigerator, a stove, or hot plate, we noted varying quality of these amenities, furnishings, the building structures themselves, and the building grounds. For example, we observed shower stalls that were filthy, covered with mold. Fewer number of our participants reported having laundry facilities available to them at their housing location, and I just want to point out that accessibility to decent shower and laundry facilities is a key health concern. Farm workers spend hours handling crops sprayed with toxic pesticides, so if they cannot wash off or disinfect their clothing, you know, the risk of exposure and illness associated with pesticide exposure increases. So now I want to talk a little bit about some of the observations we had about the quality of the housing, and I'm giving you some pictures here. At a large labor camp, we noted signs posted in the barrack-style bathroom. It's on this right here, warning residents not to drink the water. And the sign that was posted there was in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. Our team can attest to the discoloration and rotten egg odor of the water coming from these bathroom sinks. The local health department says that the water is safe to drink, but clearly workers have a safety concern, and it doesn't seem that anybody's really following up on that. Residents at the same camp complained to our team that the metal roofs of the large barrack-style bathrooms make the interior unbearably hot. Workers at the same camp also explained to our team that they actually bring their own window AC units. And I bring this up because it's important to note that current migrant labor housing standards, which date to the 1970s and the 1980s, do not require air conditioning. And this is going to become more and more of a serious issue, you know, as we see the incidence of extreme heat days increase as a result of climate change. In other labor camps, we observed, you know, kitchen cabinetry that was broken and not functional, insufficient storage of personal belongings, makeshift wiring, overflowing garbage, you know, messy grounds, broken window screens, which were useless against relentless flies. So to put our findings into context, we also analyzed 188 Maryland Department of Labor housing inspection reports for 73 unique H-2A farm worker housing sites from 10 representative farm operations on the Eastern Shore covering a 7-year period. All of these housing inspections were conducted as pre-occupancy inspections. Inspectors mainly use the older U.S. Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration, or also known as ETA, Housing for Farm Workers standards, which includes criteria for general quality of structure, minimum space requirements for living and sleeping, cooking and kitchen facilities, adequate and sanitary toilet, laundry, hand washing, et cetera, et cetera. We found that 78% of reports received approval by Maryland Department of Labor, despite 38% of those having items that did not meet ETA criteria, as noted by the DOL inspectors. Of note, some inspection reports were signed and dated as if criteria were met, despite missing documentation such as drinking water quality tests. At one particular farm operation, we noted no follow-up on nitrate levels that exceeded the US EPA maximum contaminant level standard of 10 milligrams per liter for drinking water, despite the history of such high levels at this particular location. And I do want to point out that chronic exposure to high levels of nitrate are of concern for adults. It has been associated with colorectal cancer, increasing the risk of thyroid disease. It also can cause symptoms like headaches, nausea, and stomach cramps. While violations were documented in official letters, many were simply noted in the comment section of the housing inspection checklist. I'm giving you some examples of some of those comments from inspectors on this slide. While some violations were documented, official violation letters, unofficial violation letters, many were just simply noted. And there appears to be a limited independent verification of employers addressing violations. In some cases, employers simply sent in photos as proof that they resolved any housing deficiency. But we also noted trends in the quality of these inspection reports themselves. 54% of inspection reports from DOL were handwritten, making information difficult to read. However, the quality of reports started to improve in 2023 when reports were typed instead of handwritten, but this was dependent upon the individual inspector. Overall inspection completeness with thorough inspector comments, pictures, and required documentation varied by year, site, and inspector. Some indicators to note I'm including here. 65% of reports did not list the age of the housing that they were inspecting. This is important because it determines which of the two standards, the ETA or the OSHA standards, apply for the housing. Also, oftentimes it wasn't indicated which standard they were using. Only 1 out of 7 inspectors routinely issued official warning letters despite all of these inspectors noting deficiencies. And signatures showing authorized official approval were often missing. Now, there may be an explanation for this, but it raises question about oversight and quality control mechanisms. So to wrap up, in summary, as you've been hearing, migrant seasonal farm workers on the Eastern Shore in Maryland are forced to live in poor quality housing. This is not a new story. It's not a new story for Maryland. It's not a new story across many communities in the United States. Despite some of these evidence of the substandard housing and hazardous conditions, workers are reluctant to complain. Our field observations were corroborated by our analysis of the Maryland DOL inspection reports, but we also noted serious differences and deterioration in conditions at housing locations post-occupancy after workers arrive as the growing season progresses. Now, we understand that state agencies often have a low number of inspectors and other resource constraints, but content, quality, and impact of H-2A housing inspections could improve. Some things to consider. For example, the federal ETA and OSHA migrant labor housing standards are just minimum standards, and they haven't been updated since the late 1980s. They are inadequate for protecting against health impacts, for example, associated with our changing climate, like increased and extreme heat days or increased precipitation. Maryland has an OSHA state program, an OSHA-approved state program, and could consider doing more than just the minimum standards, what's required by the federal government. Pre-occupancy housing inspections miss the cumulative public health risks that arise during the growing season. So perhaps, modernizing and digitizing housing inspections as well as conducting random and more frequent inspections could improve accountability and health protections for migrant farm workers. For example, the current practice of handwritten or typed hard copies for inspection reports makes it difficult to be able to know, are things getting better, are things getting worse, very difficult to understand what the trends might be. And to me, I would think it also makes it hard for Maryland DOL to assure quality of the inspections as well. I do want to highlight this point about drinking water. I'm just a little surprised by some of this, but drinking water quality seems to be an underappreciated health issue, potentially negatively impacting migrant seasonal farm workers. Given worker concerns about drinking water quality, the variability in water quality parameters that are tested, not the same things are tested across the different locations, and the variability in the test results themselves suggests that there is a need for more comprehensive evaluation of water quality issues at migrant seasonal farm worker housing locations. And lastly, I just want to highlight the housing requirements for migrant farm workers are governed by a complex set of federal, state, and local regulations, including the Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Worker Protection Act and the Immigration and Nationality Act. There was already discussion about when, if, local and state housing livability standards come into play. The system is fragmented, and this fragmented system creates confusion. It's not always clear who is responsible, and it allows for poor conditions to continue, creating gaps in health protections for all migrant farm workers, and what I also would call ag-adjacent farm workers like the H-2B workers in seafood processing industry. So with that, I'd just like to acknowledge my fantastic research team that's been working on this project with me, and just to say thank you all for your attention to this matter.
Thank you, Dr. Painster. It was quite informative. We have a couple questions. We'll start with Delegate Amprey and then Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for this presentation. It was very thorough and concise at the same time, which is a feat that is hard to be done, so I appreciate it. Just want to get a better understanding. You list the housing types here, and it looks like 67% are in labor camps. I guess I'm just trying to better understand the definition of a labor camp. I'm trying to understand between a mobile, like trailers, mobile homes, like what's the difference? What distinguishes as labor camp? Then I have one more question after that.
Yeah. So for our team, the way we defined it is as a location where there are multiple buildings on site housing migrant workers. So you've heard from the prior panel people talking about a labor camp. It's a barrack-style labor camp called Westover. It's probably the most infamous labor camp in the state of Maryland, in Somerset County. But we also found property where there are like multiple buildings specifically arranged on a site just for migrant labor. And so our research team is calling that migrant labor camp. But as I mentioned, people are also being housed in, single-family homes in neighborhoods.
Got it. So just better understand. So a labor camp, if there were 6 trailer mobile homes on a couple acres, that would be considered a labor camp. Got it. Okay. Just want to better understand the definition. Okay. Thank you. And I'll be honest. Like these conditions are, looking at these pictures and hearing about these conditions, from the mold to like rodent feces on clothing and stuff, is really It's really disheartening that this is happening in 2026 in our great state of Maryland. So thank you for the research and bringing it to our attention. Want to better understand, I understand it's a national problem and a regional issue, and it looks like your team is doing research across the region. Just want to get a better comparison point. A lot of times when we're doing bills, we're always comparing ourselves. What are other states doing? How are other states approaching this? Want to get a better understanding of, are these conditions similar to what you're seeing across the Mid-Atlantic, across the region? And is there any states or regions in the country where things improved, and how do they do it? So I guess it's a loaded question, but just want to get a better idea, a comparison point.
Yeah, I think what's unfortunate is that what we're seeing is consistent with what other people are seeing in different parts of the U.S., in Virginia, North Carolina. Now I'm living in Michigan as well. And I think what would be really interesting would be to benchmark with folks in these different states about what can be done, what are they doing. And I was thinking about this as I was just preparing for this right now. For example, the state of North Carolina, they do follow those ETA and OSHA housing standards, but they've actually passed law to also boost those standards. They have their own, say, fire and safety standards that the inspectors must also look for compliance with, in addition to the federal ETA and OSHA housing standards. So that's a little bit of what I was alluding to, is that the state of Maryland is a state OSHA approved program, which gives them the ability to go a little bit above and beyond what is minimum required by the federal government.
Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. And I may have asked this question to other panels, but I'll just work with you. The report I'm referencing comes from the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, and they're referencing programs under USDA called Section 515, but more specifically 514, 516, which is the Farm Labor Housing Program that's a national program. And so the report, and I can share it with my friends in the committee, but in this report, they make a statement, and I'd be curious what your response would be to the statement, and that is to say that although dramatic improvement, and this report was done in 2019, so although dramatic improvements have been made in rural housing quality over the last few decades, problems persist. Many of rural America's 65 million residents experience acute housing problems that are often overlooked while public attention is focused on big city housing issues. How do you feel about that statement?
I think this is a really good opportunity to think about doing more on rural areas and addressing rural community problems. And what you're hearing here is just one of them. And I think there would be a good idea for, I don't know, for this committee, and maybe your other colleagues in other committees, to think about drawing attention to the inequities, the poverty, and the issues in rural communities.
So I'm the chair of the Eastern Shore delegation. I represent Cecil down to Somerset County indirectly, but my 4 senators, 12 delegates, certainly represent the Eastern Shore and can reflect on the idea that we quite often come second to the big municipalities who talk often about transit-oriented housing, which we'll be talking about this year. At the same time, this committee is hearing about problems with rural housing where there's a disparity with funding that can and should be moving forward. The second point that I'll make out of this report, which is to say that there has been no Section 515 programs funded since 2011. So that's 15 years since they've built anything new. The last one that I'm generally familiar with that is farm housing was produced in the Eastern Shore of Virginia, and we're talking about Eastville, Virginia. And so the question is, if the solution, in my opinion, is more housing, okay, why are we not producing more housing that specifically assists and helps grow and sustain our rural parts of the state that are depending on agriculture?
I would agree with you.
And thank you. I'm just going to say one other thing about this, and it may not be the last time this session, and hopefully for the next few years, but in this report, it talks about what are the conclusions, and it says what to say to legislators. And I'm not going to be long. It says advocates should speak with their members of Congress and urge them to ... I'm not going to go through this, but I firmly believe, and I suspect that you might agree, that we are in the middle of a federal conversation, a federal issue, We're funding for priorities nationally for agriculture, for how we sustain the economies that are parts of our rural parts of the state, should not only be focused on how can we help housing in the large cities, but rather how can we help sustain and grow housing in the rural parts of our state. That should be a theme that us in Maryland should focus on up and down the line. No doubt that we need to improve housing conditions for the workers that we're talking about today in this one narrow instance, but I firmly believe that we are falling short of what needs to happen if we suspect that agriculture is going to continue being a main economic driver for the state of Maryland, and I know that it is. So thank you, Chair.
Delegate Roberts, then Delegate Chi, and then Delegate Weigel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just going to ask 3 questions all at once because the answers I would suspect will be very short. I'm interested in knowing, and I don't, because I know there are a lot of percentages here, but I'm interested in the number of people in the state that this is impacting. And then the number 2 is I just want to make sure we're not having this issue in Prince George's County because, of course, we wouldn't allow stuff like this to happen in our county. Okay. And then also, number 3, the properties that we're talking about in the rural areas, are the farmers the owners of the property, or are the farmers renting the properties? Right. Yeah. You get where I'm coming from.
I can start with the last one. For our study, we definitely saw a variety of those arrangements. We saw property owned by farm owners on their property, and they're housing the H-2A workers there. We mentioned the labor camp called Westover in Somerset County. I believe that is actually owned by some kind of consortium, and different employers will house their workers at that location. And then we've also seen workers housed in housing in communities, like even in Salisbury, like in a neighborhood. I believe that house was rented off, say, the commercial market to rent the house, and they house workers there. You asked about how many people are being impacted by this. This is a fantastic question. It's sort of elusive. It's hard to get a total number. I did some research on this, and the last study I had seen was published in 2000. It was an enumeration study trying to get at that exact question. And at that time, in 2000, the folks estimated 7,500 migrant seasonal farm workers in Maryland. But as you've heard from everybody here, these individuals can be on H-2A visas. They can be US-based workers who are just migrating for this employment. And then for us, we also observed workers who have work authorization as a result of them being on temporary protected status.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Did I catch everything?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Delegate Chi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. As someone who represents part of rural Montgomery County and agricultural reserve with a lot of farmers who hire seasonal workers, whether foreign-born or domestic migrant workers, of course, I have very strong interest in this issue and in housing in general. But since our committee is new to the subject, and what has been presented today seems like a pattern over many years, I just wonder if what has been done over the past few years when this was under the purview of a different committee, the Environment Transportation Committee. Did the advocates come together like you guys did today to give us a comprehensive briefing? Maybe their committee chair didn't request it. I don't know, but what has been done? It can't be the first day when we pay attention to something like this, right?
Yeah, exactly. Again, we were all invited to give this briefing, and we're very happy that people are paying attention to this. I don't know what the Environment and Transportation Committee had done on this topic of migrant seasonal farm worker housing. I have no idea.
Maybe the Department of Labor can speak to that later. But
I can say that the groups like CDM and Maryland Legal Aid and our grassroots partner CATA, I mean, they've all been doing this work for decades. Trying to address these problems as best they can.
I will say, Delegate Chi, that these briefings that we're having were coordinated by Chair Corman before we knew housing was going to be swapping committees. So I'm appreciative for him transferring it over to us. With that, we'll wrap up with Delegate Weigel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the research and the presentation. It was very informative. You told us the number of participants that you had in your study, but how about the number of housing units?
There are 14.
14? Yeah. And are they all in Maryland?
Eastern Shore, 7 out of the 9 counties.
Okay. And did you have like a survey as far as ranking what you considered a failure rate or a pass rate, or you just were?
We're starting to look at that.
Starting to do that, okay, all right. And then a lot of the trash and the cleanliness and stuff like that, do you consider that a responsibility of the occupant or the owner?
The rules say it is the employer.
So the employer is required to clean the interiors?
Sure, yeah.
And they have access, unrestricted access?
Yes, they do.
Did you have any access issues? Because we heard from another panel that they weren't allowed in. Did anyone deny you access?
Yes.
They did? Okay. And I do appreciate Delegate Adams' comment because, I mean, at some point, agriculture sustainability going forward is at risk. So if there's something that, I don't know if your study delves into that or not, but going forward, if there's some way that the burden, I'm sure a farmer would love to get rid of housing because that's not what they do. They harvest crops. But if you have any recommendations on that as well. And then 2 really stupid questions. What does MSPA and INA stand for?
So that's the Migrant Seasonal Farm Worker Protection Act,
All right.
and it's the Immigration and Nationality Act.
Immigration and Nationality Act. Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Painster, for your testimony. That will conclude this panel. Members, you'll see on your agenda, we have a written testimony only by Marley Weiss, so I encourage you to read the testimony that is provided before us. With that said, that concludes this briefing. I would like to remind the members that we do have 2 more briefings next week, two next week and 1 the following week, and then we will begin bill hearings the first week of February. With that said, a gentle reminder that if you have not paid your committee dues, please do so ASAP to Ms. Joy. And with that said, unless there's any good of the order, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.